I was living in the Dominican Republic for a really long time. From the ages, I would say 1 till like all the way till 5. So I was there for a while. I was with my grandma. And when I came here, I even remember going on the flight and like how I felt. And I was like, I was 5. So it was like all new to me, started experiencing anxiety. I didn't even know what that was.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Cosmic Chats. Today we have the delightful Rosa Perdimo, who is the founder and behind the podcast, The Feels. But before we get to that, today she has opened up and talked about how hard it was as a young child immigrating from Dominican Republic to the United States and what she did to adapt. How would you describe the taste of a banana to someone who's never eaten one?
I would describe a taste of a banana, very sweet. Reminds me kind of like an island, right? Like you would picture yourself in an island because it's kind of like fruity. So, the texture is kind of like melts in your mouth, sort of. And it has this overall sweet taste, and a banana, it's great. You should try it.
So when did you have your first existential life crisis as a child?
I would say my first crisis that I remember, because, I've had a couple, but I remember one and specifically, and that was definitely when I left the Dominican Republic, because I was living in the Dominican Republic for a really long time. From the ages, I would say 1 till like all the way till 5. So I was there for a while. I was with my grandma, and when I came here, I even remember going on the flight and like how I felt. And I was like, I was 5. So it was like all new to me, started experiencing anxiety. I didn't even know what that was, So definitely coming here, new transition,
It was 5 years, you were 5 years old and you moved to the States.
Yes, correct.
And was it a planned move or was it a last minute thing? Everything was upheaval.
Well, for my family, I'm Dominican. So for the way that the family was structured was the child doesn't really know anything. Don't tell the child anything. It's not informed to us. So it was just one day, pack your bags. We're going. You're leaving, because my grandma stayed. So that was the traumatizing part for me, because I'm leaving somebody that basically raised me and going with my mom to the States. So it was a huge transition for me because nothing was told to me. I was just, moved one day to the next. So that would be the most, something that I still remember,
What are the images that you remember?
The way the plane smelled, the fact that there was a lady that was helping us. Well, I don't know how you call those people, the flight attendants, I guess, that they take care of the child if the mom doesn't go. So I remember the flight attendant, blonde hair, really nice. And I just remember holding her hands. Her hands were cold, and like just the whole seeing my mom there, like smiling, and I was happy, but it was such a weird feeling for me because new experience, new places, like, and it didn't look the same because we would climb trees to get mangoes and stuff in the Dominican and walk barefooted, that was normal for us, to then coming here and, very new.
Did you find, so let's say that you had come to America and everything was fabulous. Right. Would that then be, oh, it was a great move? But it seems to me that you're having memories of it was a big transition and some things didn't seem to gel.
No, right. Because once I moved to the States, I didn't have the best journey here, right? I wouldn't say that it was my mother. My mom she did the best that she could with what she knew. And that I learned, with meditating, with writing, with my podcast and, expressing myself. But I moved here and it was, I had to kind of build a relationship again with my mom, and it was very codependent a little bit because, she would come to me a lot for emotional guidance. And I was very small. So that kind of was new to me. My grandma was a very strong woman, so she never really said what she was going through.
Now, why did your mom move?
Well, my mom wanted, better life. Honestly, she wanted to bring my grandma to the States. So that was her number one mission. So she came first, and then, she left me with my grandma, and she took my brother. So my brother was with her. So ultimately, to have a better life for herself. And
so your mom was gone how long before you joined her?
So I was gone from her, I would say like 5 years, because I went over there at 1, right? As a little baby, I went, and then I came back at 5. So 5 years roughly. She would call. So it wasn't like we were away from each other. It was just the whole transition for me that was a lot, and like missing my grandma, because me and my grandma are very close. She's still alive. I'm very happy about that, 85. But, it was my relationship with her, which was really hard for me to express myself easily like I did with her. My mom.
And why was that? What were the stopping blocks that you felt you had?
Oh, like I said, my family was very closed up. So it's like, you don't say anything. Things happen, you don't mention them. Should be strong and like brush it off. That's how we were raised, right? So with my grandma, she was a little bit more lenient with me. So, I was able to talk a little bit more freely with her, as opposed to my mom, who was very closed off. She has her own trauma, which she does not express. So I can't expect, now I know this. Before I didn't. How could I expect her to know these things and know how to approach me and tell me, how do you feel? And, let me express myself, if she couldn't do that, she didn't know how to do that. So it was hard because I would go through things and just bottle them up. You know what I mean? Like, oh, it's fine. Like maybe cry in the bathroom, come out, be fine,
Mm-hmm. So
but
when you had the transition challenges, what were the first ones? Obviously you missed your grandma, right?
Yeah.
What else were the challenges that you felt in the new country?
Definitely trying to learn the language. I had to go to speech in school. So getting taken out of the class, and everybody looking at you because you have like once a day, a speech teacher would come and you would have to go with her, and they kind of knew why. So it was transitioning through that, trying to make friends, experiencing anxiety and not knowing that it was anxiety,
The environment that you were in, were there any other people who did not have English as a first language?
No, not really, because I was sent to a school where it was all English. You know what I mean? All the teachers spoke English, which is why they had to get me an ESL teacher to I would say my English has improved. But, before it was really hard for me. And it was, I felt kind of left out, because I didn't know how to relate to people and stuff. Usually in the Dominican Republic, I was walking around barefoot, going to the beaches, you know what I mean? Doing things that were very calm and smooth, to then going somewhere and it's gotta do this and you gotta do that. And everything is we have to work. And relaxing is not really considered.
So the whole lifestyle was jarring.
Yeah, for sure.
When did the language become less of a barrier? When you were 6, 7?
Right. Once they, you know, I did speech and I was getting used to like the classes and the teachers talking to you in English and the kids talking to you in English. It took a couple of months, I would say like a year or two for me to like understand it.
Okay.
But, you know, it was still, I still lived with the really bad anxiety, not understanding why am I so scared to leave my house? You get what I mean? Like I would like go on the school bus and I'm like shaking and I'm like, why am I? And I would tell myself this, but I couldn't express that because mental health in our family too was not.
So your brother who had gone before, did he have the same transition with the language?
He learned a little fast because he stayed in New York. He stayed in the United States. So for him, it was, you know, much faster. He doesn't really know how to speak as much Spanish. So because of that, you know, but yeah.
So yes, well, you're not alone with that. I mean, adults in another country, or I remember school trips as a teenager, just crying and crying because even though I was safe staying in someone else's house, I didn't have the language to be able to communicate. Right. And then that would trigger fight or flight responses. Like, how would I be able to tell someone help or something, you know?
Exactly. That's how I felt. Like, you know, we were in my family, it was very restricted. Like we couldn't say certain things. So even when I got a chance to have a therapist, which was my first therapist, her name was Maria. I thought she was great. She was amazing. And I wanted to express myself so bad. And I remember as a child not being able, the words would not come out. It's like something's going to happen. You can't say how you're feeling because that's wrong, you know? So I would not say.
And how old were you when you found a therapist?
Oh, I was around 12.
Oh, 12. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and so you're still a minor. What brought the attention to go to therapy as a tween?
I had a lot of, they didn't diagnose me with ADHD, but I had a lot of ADHD tendencies, I would say, you know, not being able to stay still, not being able to concentrate. And because of that transition that I made from the Dominican Republic to the United States, I was just very timid into myself. And I have a scar. I don't know if you can see it, but I have a scar right here. Yeah, it's right here. Here. And it affected me in a lot of ways because I would wear bangs and those bangs were going to stay there, rain, shine. It didn't matter what was going on because I didn't want people to see my scar. Like I was so timid with that. And I would be by myself. And, you know, like I kind of created a relationship with myself, you know.
But was there an event or a reason why, if it comes from a background where you don't talk to other people and tell people, that you ended up with a therapist at 12?
Well, my mom ended up seeing that, you know, I don't talk to anyone. So she was like, let me get you a therapist. How do you feel about that? I kind of inside was so happy. You know what I mean? I was like, yeah, you know, like I can like talk about stuff. And, you know, I was happy because I had a lot of things bottled up that I wanted to talk about. And when I got there, the chemistry between me and her were great. She was amazing. And I just could not say everything that I wanted to say. I felt really limited. And that's because I feel like of how I was, or I would say how me and my brother were raised.
So like even though you were had solace in an elder, right? And it was very clear, you know, you were having language problems that started to get broken down. And even though you were desperately wanted to share, and you had permission from a parent who basically set up, go talk to this person, still you couldn't open up.
Right, because there were certain things my mom would tell us we can say, we can't say, you know what I mean? Like, oh, you can't say that I like scream at you at a certain, you know, like she would like coach it, before I would go to therapy. And I felt like that was the most damaging thing, because you're wiring me, you know what I mean, to not be able to express myself. So now,
yes, right. Because as a child, it comes across as you're stopping me from expressing myself, rather than an adult perspective of, this person may misunderstand what you say, and then I will lose you as a child.
Yes, that was her biggest fear. So it was very like, you know, don't say this, don't say that. So then I was like, okay, but there's been certain things that have affected me, and I feel like you know what I mean, I should be, but then it would be a non-discussion. No, you can't, you know.
When did you start on your own path, or was there a triggering event in your own life that said, enough is enough, I'm going to start unraveling and delving deep into this for who I am. I'm not going to live my life the same way that they have?
Oh, yeah. So I would say this was 3 years ago now, 3 years ago. I was with my mother. I was staying with my mother, and we got into this altercation. She ended up throwing me out of the house. So I left, right? First time, I've never gotten thrown out the house. So this was a huge transition. I had to find my way. You know what I mean? I had to find my way. I had to get a hotel. Thank God I had savings. I had to really, you know,
and how old were you at this time?
I was probably, I'm 27 now. I was probably 25.
Okay, 25. You were still at home at 25, yeah?
Yeah. So then once I left, you know, I had to find my way. I had to get a hotel, and it was really hard for me that month, I would say, because I was by myself, literally alone. And I would journal, like I would cry, and I would like journal in the hotel room and stuff. And something took over me, like, you know what, you can do this. You can express yourself and your story, because your story, I feel like, is powerful, and anybody or somebody out there can relate to it, you know. Feeling like you're not as connected to a parent, and like, you know what I mean, having all this love, but then like not, but then also having like this resentment in a way, you know what I mean? So it's hard to like balance it, you know. So that month, I feel like I became very, very, very strong, wise, because I was in this by myself, you know. I wasn't really, she was always like an aspiration because she was always there. So I was kind of clinged to, like, kind of narcissistic, you know what I mean?
So
like,
there was exactly what you had said before. There was a codependency that you didn't realize that you were enmeshed into,
yes.
Right? The familial codependency, not knowing how codependent that was until you went into hermit mode, really.
Yeah, I had to do a lot of shadow work, you know, and get to know myself, like, who are you?
Because and so for people who don't, I'm just going to clarify, people who don't know what shadow work is, it's got nothing to do with anything, a sorcery element. Right, it's basically coming to terms with your own trauma in yourself and digging deep within fully. And it's only a path that anyone can ever do themselves. No one can do it for you. Go ahead.
Yeah, talking to your inner child, like, you know, sitting down with your inner child and actually working with your inner child. I feel like that honestly helps, because for a lot of people, therapy is not available, or they can't get therapy, or they feel like they can't speak on certain things because of the family dynamic. So it makes it very hard for someone to, you know, just talk about their feelings, you know.
Now, let me ask you this question. So you had seen a therapist at 12. How long did you see a therapist? Were you always seeing a therapist until this happened, or?
No, I saw her at 12. I was only with her for like 3-4 months, because then my insurance, she changed insurance. So then I couldn't get her anymore.
Right. So then did you go, because I guess I'm trying to find out, were you doing this on your own? It was
I'm gonna get to that. So once that stopped, right? Once that stopped, which was like a couple months, right? No way for me to get a therapist. So I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? I started unconsciously, like, I would be my own therapist. I'm doing self-therapy, you know, where that is writing out my emotions, right? Actually expressing myself, like letting myself, like, no matter how that turns out, you know, with that took a lot of practice, because self-therapy is a lot of trial and error. Because there's no way that you're going to learn, hey, I shouldn't do this. You know what I mean? If something doesn't occur, you know? So with all the trauma that I went through, I would put pieces in, like, oh, okay, now I know that I have to do this, or maybe this is more soothing for me, you know? Meditation became a lifesaver because
right. Well, we're going to take a second that some of you might see this image behind me. If you don't know what Aware Meditation Inc. is, there's some links in the description below. You can go look at the website. But one course of it is that it's a nonprofit wanting to bring a meditation, non-directive practices, which basically means it's not focusing on concentrating on your breath, but allowing the mind to go in to get that deep rest. And so the stress can start to come out. And then there's a space to do what I think you're talking about, being able to listen to that deep inner voice. And that's where our intuition is, right? And part of the nonprofit is to bring it to people who are not aware of this possible tool that's available. And, you know, it's a course over 4 days, a couple of hours each day. And then you have a self-sufficient practice, which for most people, you know, it's not necessarily in the financial realm. But the ebook here is the only publication globally that has true stories from people who learned the practice, not necessarily from affluent backgrounds, like a couple are, and how it actually changed their life in application, right? Not a theory. And I'm not necessarily talking about somebody got the rainbows in the mansion. We're talking about practical things. Someone who was on lots of medication for mental health, worked with their doctor, diminished it down, was never someone who could hold a job, has a job, even has a family. Like, those are remarkable feats for what some people came from and as a practice. So that's all there and available. And the idea is that we go into communities who are welcoming and wanting to have another modality that's not infringing upon anyone's religion or belief. Because the word meditation, people get a bit confused. You know, meditato comes from the Latin, and who is doing Latin? You know, the monks were doing it. And so they're concentrating on their word of their philosopher, their belief system, right? Christ. And then they took images of people in India, and being good Westerners, we mix the whole thing up. And to some people, it's a complete cult or whatnot. But no, not absolutely. The idea is having a technique to go inward, to be able to get the clutter out, to do as you would listen to your own, what we like to call higher self, right? The wisdom. But when we are stressed, when we have anxiety, right, we are in a fight or flight mode. So we can't listen necessarily, or that we want it to be a flow. I mean, there are moments of awakening when there's a crisis, right? And suddenly a voice in me said, go here or go there, right? That's that inner voice. So your journey talks about how, you know, you started to naturally go in because it was so ready. And that triggering event with your mom, I mean, you didn't have to go. You know, you could have stayed, but something in you said, that's it. I'm going to get my own place for a while. And, you know, you cried a lot. You found a way to go inward. You know, individuals like Eckhart Tolle could not really give a technique. He had his experience of what happened and ended up on the streets, right? So often a spiritual awakening, an awakening of the soul, or there's a lovely book called The Dark Night of the Soul. It's a one-on-one journey. Right?
It is. It
yeah,
really
keep going.
is. You know, you're completely right. For me, meditation was, because people think that you're not supposed to think when you're meditating. A thought is not supposed to come through your mind. That's very unrealistic, just because it's going to happen. Your mind is just prone to that. So, you know, it's kind of like observing the thought and letting it go. Just as easy as it came is as easy as it's going to leave.
Exactly.
So meditating really did ground me when I was just going through so much anxiety and so much, you know what I mean? And now I even do it even when I'm not going through anything, because it's a huge stress reliever.
It's a preventative strike, right?
Right.
How many times do people, get to the doctor? Oh, if you came to me sooner, we could have done these preventative measures. And you had mentioned before we were recording, the stresses nowadays, that the dream as a child was stay at home and not have to go to school and deal with the bullies. Well, there was a year or so where all the kids were at home. The levels of anxiety and stress through the roof, not the other way around. And what happened, everything made a movement more online. So the social media, it's more present now. Everything is able, in some ways, we have more communication, but it has to be on top of you. You have to respond. Heaven forbid, I'm on a walk for 30 minutes and I'm not answering emails or phone calls. People think, oh, they're not responsive. But this idea of being able to have the solitude and doing that regularly and being in the world, not going away to a retreat. That's what exactly retreating, you're moving back. No, we want to integrate into the world so you can function in the world at a higher, vibration sounds woo-woo, but a higher consciousness. So you're not as stressed, you're in the world and you're doing what your path is, which brings more happiness, less anxiety, less fear, and the body is less at the effect of being at fight or flight.
Exactly. Because, like being like jittery all the time, which is why I stopped drinking coffee, because I feel like that adds a lot to it. Green tea is the way to go, because that's natural. Yeah, it naturally gives you energy. In this case, for me, just being able to ground myself, right? Because I'm a very emotional person. So I feel with my emotions, So with meditating, when I'm going through certain things, it calms you down, So I used it a lot while I was in my turmoil, which honestly is not a turmoil, because it was a life experience and I learned and I made my podcast, and I'm getting so much responses off of just telling my life story,
It brought you to who you are now. And if you want to find that information out, it will all be in the description where you can go and connect to her. I want to thank you, Rosa, so much for joining us on these Cosmic Chats. If you have enjoyed it, please like, share, subscribe if you want to, put some comments in there for us. But I'd like to thank you all for spending this time on this Cosmic Chat.